Bryan Moore is an intentional investor, out now, Epsilon Theory YouTube. We talked about how he drives in silence. That kind of makes him a freak, right? I was a little concerned when he said this, but it's all about cultivating quiet. I can respect that. We talked about the time he had to hit the bid for a Vatican trade. Literally, the Vatican calls into place a trade. Might have saved his soul with that one. And we talked about, and most of this, just a career in trading, in markets, in ETFs, what it means to just take himself all over the world, learn all this stuff, because that was the focus the whole time. How to keep learning and growing through an entire career. Wonderful man, wonderful father, wonderful stories. You're going to love this. Roll some clips, Jack Forehand.
I am actually a really weird individual. I will listen to music when I work, but when I get in the car, I don't typically listen to anything.
No. Silence? You're a silence driver?
Yes. My wife and kids think I'm a little bit of a psychotic kind of individual for silence driving. So many different things kind of going on all the time. For me, that's kind of the one time where I'm like, okay, I'm going to carve out this time and just focus singularity. The coolest trade I ever did, the Vatican.
Wait, does the Vatican call you to put the trade on?
Vatican called the sales desk at Morgan Stanley and said, we wanted to buy, I think it was like, I don't know, like 100,000 Qs. And I was like, it's the Vatican, man. They can buy it on the bid. So I lost money on that trade, God. In case you're wondering, I can remember the first thing I said was, I want to be challenged every day and I constantly want to be learning. And this job has given me that in spades every day. Just when you think you have something figured out, it goes and flips the script. And I've kind of told myself since I was, when I was younger, that like, don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. It's not easy, but something that once you get used to it, you can actually turn that into a huge advantage.
Welcome to The Intentional Investor with Matt Ziegler, where he and his guests explore the intersection of investing and life, portfolio, and purpose. Nothing in this podcast is investment advice. Nothing in this podcast is advising you to buy or sell any security or to do anything with your money. Seriously, you should only act on investment advice from someone you know and who knows your unique situation. We are not that person. Matt Ziegler is a managing director at SunPoint Investments, and the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of SunPoint Investments or of Second Foundation Partners. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of SunPoint Investments.
You're watching The Intentional Investor right here on Epsilon Theory YouTube. I'm Matt Ziegler, and this guest today, let me tell you, he gives us so much more. And how much more? I can already hear you asking. I can hear him asking in his head. I hope he's scared. For one, or should I say ones plural, and we're taking this to 11, so mind your Jim Carroll's people. Spoiler alert, it's not Andrea True. But while I have doubt that he's much of a disco guy, I have a feeling he can dance better than he can sing. So count this as true. We're giving you more. How do you like it? How do you like it? How do you like your love? Which has been stuck in my head all morning, so I hope this is revenge for that. So I'm leaving that reference in. Unless you think I'm kicking the can or saying his name, I'm going to pump the Can, C-A-N Can, the great prog rock act. And if you know, you know that I want more. Do you want more? They want more. And giving you stuff outside of your sweet spots. I'm aware of this, sir. So let's get a little more direct. He's probably all Chicago, at least in location, maybe a little Boston sometimes, which means he's definitely more than a feeling. And when it comes to ETFs and being passive, he's an advocate for being active, even in the wrapper these days. So kind of like Roxy Music. He's down for wanting more than this. And if you think I'm staying in the 80s just to get extreme, underline that one for me. Tell him something more than words. Get that out your face. He's an idol who knows if equity markets ever trade 24/7 in the US, then in the midnight hour, we'll all be crying for him. More, which can only mean one thing. Host of the Active Advisor podcast, Harbor Capital's own Mr. Bryan Moore. Welcome to the Intentional Investor.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was quite the intro. And I love all the song references. I do like a little disco. I'm not going to lie.
How could you not, right? Like, how could you
I mean,
not?
it was just a great era, you know?
It's special. It's special, and it's a pinnacle of the pop music craft, and I think sometimes it gets thrown under the bus for just being trashy dance music, but it's the pop music form is strong in disco.
Yeah. No, agreed. Great.
All right, so first things first, because this is part of the reason I wanted to have you on, music and research notes. A, why, B, who are you listening to this morning?
Well, this morning, on my research note, I did Papa Was a Rolling Stone by the Tinks. That was, it's one of the few songs with basically Papa or Dad's in the title. You did have to walk that one back a little bit. I think there was some kind of possible negative connotations with that one. So I had to basically shout out to all the dads saying, hopefully we're better than the dad in this song. But that was kind of where we were.
Well,
It's been, otherwise, you've got a lot of REM lately kind of going through my head, a little kind of disconnect, a little angst that the market's kind of, searching what's going on. It's not even what's the frequency count. It's more like, what's the frequency, Trump right now. So, that's kind of where I'm at.
I could see that. Do you feel like, does music just become a sandbox that you play in alongside these ideas? It helps you explore the ideas. How do you think about the relationship between music and writing about investment research?
Great question. Sometimes I do have to be intentional kind of when I'm thinking about something. Otherwise, it's just kind of, I'll be writing something, and I never thought of myself as musically inclined. I tried out for choir in high school, and the teacher told me that my voice wasn't ready yet. So I kind of stopped my music career there. But I'm listening to a lot of different music. There's sometimes songs that'll just kind of pop in my head when I'm writing something, and they kind of connect back to that point in time. And it kind of comes full circle for me. And I tell the people that read the note, I'm like, I apologize. Some of this stuff may not make sense to you, but it did to me when I wrote it. So that's why it's out there.
The muse talks to you individually. Doesn't necessarily talk to everybody else. That's your job, right?
Exactly. It's just kind of, I apologize, but here it is. Hopefully you can take something away from it.
I so treasure it. I love seeing notes from you. Jim Carroll, we got to shout to. Same thing. Just give me something that goes, I'm just excited to think about this song and why you thought of it. So I love that. Take me all the way back. Where in the world is Bryan Moore originally from? Where'd you grow up?
That's a long question. So I was born in Virginia, grew up in Oklahoma, moved to Arkansas, back to Oklahoma, and then back to Virginia. And decided, kind of probably a junior year that I wasn't kind of ready for college just yet. And so, I wanted to be all I could be, and I joined the military, where I found out I was colorblind. I just thought I had a passion for drab clothing and blue and khaki, but it turns out there was a medical reason behind that. So went in the infantry, sure, and then got out and went to school at DePaul University in Chicago.
All right.
I fell in love with Chicago.
I'm not letting you get away from this part that easily. All the bouncing around in all the states, born, raised, moved around, mom and dad. What was the reason for that?
But a little bit of mom and dad. Yeah. Yeah. Different jobs, different places. It kind of made for an interesting childhood where you got to listen to a lot of different music, right? It was kind of, you would go, kind of country music, deep country music, David Allan Coe in some areas, and then you would go in other areas, and it just kind of was made for a different kind of unique experience. And then joining the military, you didn't get to choose your roommate. So, there'd be people you're like, what are you listening to? I've never even heard of that. And so it really kind of broadened my appreciation for a little bit of everything.
Which is an amazing way to do it. Now, are mom and dad musically inclined in any way, and any siblings too?
2 siblings, 2 younger sisters. No, none of us are musically inclined. I don't think any of us could carry a note in a wheelbarrow.
In a wheelbarrow, which is not a regional dependent term. What about, is it just on in the background in the house? I know you're bouncing around, so you're hearing stuff. Is that just on the radio?
Sometimes, yeah. I am actually a really weird individual. I will listen to music when I work, but when I get in the car, I don't typically listen to anything.
No. Silence? You're a silence driver?
Yes. But of course, my wife and kids are in, they put the music on. But yeah, I listen to it when I'm working outside, when I'm working in the garage, something like that. Yeah, it's kind of weird. My wife and kids think I'm a little bit of a psychotic kind of individual for silence driving.
Only you're okay because you let them turn it on.
For me, yeah.
Is that meditative time for you? Is that like,
pretty much?
Yeah.
You know how it is. You're involved with the markets. You've got so many different things kind of going on all the time. For me, that's kind of the one time where I'm like, okay, I'm going to carve out this time and just, focus singularity. And a lot of times that's where, you know, it's, you can think of themes, you can kind of think about, I replay in my head. That's, I mean, one thing I'm guilty of is replaying everything in my head, numerous times. So you'll replay kind of what you saw play out that week or what you saw kind of happen. How does that, or what I've read, and kind of how does that get translate into, you know, possibly what happens next?
That's so interesting. So what are you into? I want pre the military days too. Like in high school, are you taken to anything? Are you a math junkie, a science junkie? Are you just studying sociology or politics or history? What are you interested in before the military service?
Man, that's a good question. I would say history and science, definitely kind of more towards the history side. It has been, I got my degree at DePaul in public policy. It's something that I innately feel, and we do it in this business without even thinking about it, that, you know, we should help others and kind of in society. And I tell, you know, I probably say it when we were talking before, we're all in this big journey called life together, and it all ends up at the same place. So to do something to help somebody else out in the middle is kind of the way I like to think I live my life, and others should.
Young Bryan, what part of history? What was the, I love this part of history. What fascinated you the most?
Well, growing up in Virginia, when we would go down to Williamsburg a lot. And it was really kind of interesting to see and hear about the original settlements and stuff like that. I always thought that was kind of interesting. I would have been a key kid if I went to William and Mary, probably would have been working wearing a colonial garb. They could find something that's fitting.
A noble career too. A noble career.
You know,
What was it about, like, just the idea of settling a new country, setting up a new country, all that kind of stuff? Was that the fascination, or was it something more?
I think it's being first to do something. I think one of the things, having moved around so much growing up, I realized that you constantly have to kind of push your comfort zone. And I think so many people kind of, you find that comforting place in life, and there's nothing wrong with it. But that's kind of where people stay. And I've kind of told myself since I was, you know, when I was younger, that, like, don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. You know, it's not easy, but something that once you get used to it, you can actually turn that into a huge advantage.
Senior year comes around. You're thinking about what to do next. You're thinking about this interest. How clear is the path? And you're in Virginia still at this point, right? You're high school in Virginia?
Yeah.
So how clear is the path out of Virginia, or what you're going to do, versus how much is it just a crapshoot?
You know, it's funny. We're doing this now with my daughter, who's 17,
Yeah.
looking at schools, and she has, she feels this pressure, I think, because everybody's now on social media. I've committed here. I'm going to study here. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, there's days I wake up, I still don't know what it is I want to do. You know, and I'm sure you feel this. It's like, you don't have to kind of figure it all out, you know, as a senior in high school. It's one of those things. I think some of the people who end up being the best at what they do probably figured out, you know, in their 20s, what it is they wanted to do.
There's that
Some in the 30s.
There's that weird push and pull. You don't have to figure it out, and in a weird way, you almost can't figure it out. Like, you're gonna have to figure it out again and again. Back to your discomfort point. That's what that is, right? Get comfortable with the figuring.
Yep.
All right. So senior year, put yourself in your daughter's shoes a little bit, transport yourself back in time. Do you have a clear idea of what's next, or is it just I'm going to close my eyes and jump?
I'm going to close my eyes and jump, which is kind of what I did in the Army. And then I ended up jumping out of planes. So I guess that segue fit. It was, to me, I knew I wasn't ready for college, but I knew I wanted to do something a little bit different. I kind of wanted to go out and live a little bit and kind of learn on Uncle Sam's dime, which I did. I mean, I think for me, when I got out and went to college, it was a breeze because I'd already, you've got your partying out, already had, done things, travel places. And for me, college was more like a job. So I would go in at, 8 a.m., be done by 3, go home, do the homework, go out and work, and then kind of do whatever. So it enabled me to kind of, I think people are finding themselves in college. They're kind of learning to live on their own. And they're going to school on mom and dad's dime in a lot of cases, some cases, or even on their own dime. but I was able to do a lot of those things in the military. And then, so for school for me was really kind of much more of, okay, I actually want to go here to learn. I want to kind of, I don't have to figure everything out right now.
How much of a military person are you? I see that discipline coming out of the military, especially in the way you just explained your approach to school, which was not my approach to school and college.
No, I feel like that's the difference, right? I mean, coming from the military, it was kind of, okay, this is what I do. I wake up here, I go do that, and I do that. And I've definitely softened over the years, but I still keep a pretty, clean house and clean office. Even though my wife might disagree, it's still pretty clean just looking around.
I'm going to say it's pretty clean looking around. And I'm going to say I'm still living in a variation of my college dorm room probably, but some of that's by design. So what about coming out of the military then? How long were you in no active duty, or did you do any active duty?
Yes,
All
4.5 years. I got out, let's see, I think I got out March 18th, 1996.
Okay.
Then I went to Northern Virginia Community College for a semester, and then I enrolled DePaul's on quarters. So I kind of moved to Chicago in December. I do not ever recommend doing that. That was kind of bad planning and logistics on my part. And then started attending class in January.
How many times had you been to Chicago before you selected, like, why DePaul? Actually, maybe that's the best question.
Oh, just let me tell this.
I'm making you tell this.
They had the shortest essay, and I could apply for the adult application. So it was like one pager.
How many did you look at? Be honest.
The mayor at the time went there.
Look,
Bailey went there. Honestly, I wanted to go to the University of Oklahoma. I was dead set on going there, but they said I had to live in the freshman dorm. And I was like, there's no way I'm living with an 18-year-old.
Right.
No offense to an 18-year-old, but I was like, no, it's not going to. So
it came down to University of Oklahoma or DePaul. DePaul wouldn't make you live with an 18-year-old and had a really short application. And you said, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Well, I was slightly a little bit more than that, but honestly, not much.
Okay.
It was like, I knew I wanted to go to school. So if we're going to take a deeper step in this, I'm coming out of the military. Okay. I moved back home with mom and dad, went to community college, worked. I knew I wanted to go to school in the city because in looking at colleges, just doing some research, I said, okay, I want to be able to like walk off campus and actually have people my own age I can kind of meet with, and talk to. So I knew kind of the cities where I wanted to go. I knew I kind of wanted to be somewhere in the Midwest, cheaper. And I went to Chicago once or twice and just kind of fell in love with it. And it kind of was, I'm like, this is it. This is where I want to go.
Major, did you know right away going in what you were going to study, or was it you ticked off the other boxes and that DePaul was just enough of a fit?
Yeah, I went in with environmental science in mind, and probably about 1.5 years into it, I had a professor at a liberal arts school, and I had a professor that we had to take a policy course of some kind, and I took it, and I'm like, this actually really sounds something that interests me. And then so I kind of switched up my major midstream and went public policy with a concentration in environmental science.
What was the draw to environmental science, knowing that this would have been, this is still in the 90s, right?
Yes. So you really want to hear a good laugh?
Please.
I did not want to work in front of a computer. I wanted to be outside.
Bloomberg thanks you for your service. What? Was that literally the idea? You did the military stuff, you grew up in Virginia, and you just thought,
I want to be outside. If you would have asked, that individual back then, he would have said, there's no way I want to work in an office. I want to be outside. I kind of want to be doing something active and, kind of giving back. And I totally screwed that one up.
Well, you live and you learn.
You're right, some you don't, it's just, it's how it goes.
What was Chicago was good to you when you were there? I'm imagining the college years, you just fell more and more in love with the city.
Yeah. It is it's a city of neighborhoods, which kind of I really love. It's not. It has the city itself has a unique feel to it, but it's different in every kind of neighborhood that you go to. And I think you find that the winters kind of are harsh, but people are friendly. It's not like New York. I think there's kind of a certain bravado and kind of brashness. Chicagoans can have that too, but it's much less so. And I think it's a much friendlier city. And I think, it's right there on the lake. You've got, there's a lot of things going for it. Plus, if you go 2 hours outside the city, you can kind of be in some of the best, rural areas and flat farmland areas, if that's your thing as well. So had a lot going for it.
It's got a lot going on. The woods aren't far away. And I mean, great music scene, great food scene.
Yes. I hung out at, I think it was Buddy Guy's.
The blues place. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I went there a lot in college.
Fantastic. And we just have to ask, this could be then or now. Favorite food spots? Where are your favorite places to eat? You got a few? There's too many in Chicago. This is part of the problem.
There's too many. There's way too many. Lou Malnati's is that's
okay.
Where I love
you're a
loyal.
I should have worn my Pequod shirt for this interview. I'm
Well,
regretting it.
Pequod's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, they're pretty good. Lou Malnati's for pizza. I think if you want to go Chicago pizza and oven grinder, it's right. It's kind of down below the surface, and it's like in the basement of a brownstone, and it's right across the street from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Really?
Yeah, but their food is awesome.
That's the spot.
And then if you want to go and kind of, it's, you're feeling good and you kind of maybe want to get harassed at 2 a.m, you can go to the Wiener Circle or a hot dog.
Can't go wrong with that. And
nothing
beats a Chicago dog.
You have to be prepared.
You got to be prepared.
That's the people behind the counter are going to rough you up a little.
That's a good dining experience, though, to get roughed up a little bit by the people serving the food. I'm always important life lessons.
Exactly. Hey, they have a hard job. They have to take it out on somebody.
All right. So Chicago, do you actually graduate with that degree with the policy focus?
Yep.
And of course you go right into a degree in public policy or something, right? That's the job is right there.
So I was actually looking to apply to get my MBA.
Same school or somewhere else?
No, somewhere else. And in the process of doing that, I really random. I interviewed for a database programming job, and did not get hired for that job, but they gave my resume to a gentleman that was starting up a trading firm. So literally I'm kind of working, going through applications, not out of college yet. And all of a sudden I get this phone call. Hi, I got, so-and-so, I'm starting up this trading shop. Love it if you come on down and talk to us. I'm like, how did you get my name? Who are you? What's going, I got it from, the REIT that you interviewed with. You can just give my resume out to people. Like, what do you mean? And anyway, I went in there and kind of, fell in love with it. I can remember the first thing I said was, I want to be challenged every day. And I constantly want to be learning. And this job has given me that in spades every day. Just when you think you have something figured out, it goes and flips the script.
I'm into that. What about even the database programming? Were you already doing computer stuff, Mr. Environmental Studies?
You had to kind of for the environmental science part of it. You're definitely doing a lot of data crunching, and kind of database mining and building.
Did you find yourself drawn to that? Did you just like it? Was it easy? You're in the interesting crossover generation too of school of where, when was the first computer part of your military life? Was there a computer at all at the end of high school for you?
No, it was in college. I really started kind of getting used to them. Yeah, it was that had a computer lab, right? So you just you'd bring your desk and go plug it in and work in the library. So it was kind of I guess probably more in college. And then kind of I had I think a little laptop when I was going to school, but it's kind of funny. I mean, going back then, cell phones were just, basically reception was getting better and better. We still had landlines,
If you had a cell phone, you had the suitcase phone and the battery plug in, the whole pack. Yeah. What was the draw to computers and specifically that database work? Did you look at it as here's a new skill that's emergent in the world and therefore it's interesting, or were you just drawn to first person to do something?
It's kind of, it was a REIT. I don't know what's the exact name of it, but it was kind of something I'm like, you know what, that could translate, kind of get my foot in the door. It could translate to doing something, different, at the place.
How important was that, just to be doing something different coming out of school? Because you didn't want to go into a direct policy role, it sounds like.
No, I didn't. I found it interesting. I thought in order for me to basically make a meaningful difference in policy, I think you needed that MBA or you needed some sort of advanced degree to go along with that. And so kind of in my conversations with my professors and everything else, I kind of was like, okay, so if I don't go that route, what am I doing? And I really just kind of, I took the phone call and went down and talked to the group and fell into trading. And I think I had the interview on like a Wednesday, Thursday, and I started on a Monday.
Oh my God.
How's that for a turnaround time? And then after being there for a few weeks, I went in one Monday morning and they gave me a massive 3-ring binder. And they said, here you go. Here's your Series 7. Test is Friday morning. If you pass it, come on in the next morning. If you don't, just stay home. Don't bother coming back. So there's no pressure there.
No.
So I think I came in with like a whopping 72 on that exam. 70 was passing.
Congratulations. So, I think I got a 71 on mine.
It was right. I mean, it was just kind of one of those, like, I definitely did not study too much. Even though I did, in a really good 3.5 days cramming session.
All right. How much finance are you exposed to at that point? Personally, the experience with the 7 was I sort of flubbed my way through even admitting what a stock or a bond was. I listened to enough Planet Money to fake my way through that interview. But that was the first time I was exposed to a lot of that stuff. I'm curious, with you, did you already have knowledge of these things? Had anyone taught you any of this stuff before?
So I kind of helped set up, I guess, a lot of the operational stuff. So like basically connectivity, the various broker dealers. And so I kind of had a very, high level probably knowledge of kind of everything. Definitely nowhere near probably what I needed to take the test. But it started to all kind of sink in. I would say it really took me a good first year of drinking from a fire hose to where, that you finally had that aha moment. Okay, I see how this all starts to kind of work and kind of sync together and kind of become a functioning market system.
What's the actual trading desk job? What are you actually doing besides the operation stuff?
So I was on basically a Globex terminal, which was trading E-minis back then, which were not near as liquid as the big futures were in the pit. And I had a person in the pit and we had a person at the Q pit. And so you had two different, very loud pits going on at all times in your ears. And it was, and kind of, you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Where can I sell this stuff? And it was so crazy. When I tell you around the holidays, I'd say the week before Christmas, most of the people in the futures pits would take off. And so literally my guy down there, we'd have brokers come up to him and go, what's your bid? I'm like, what do you, and he's like, what do we bid? And I'm like, well, I'm seeing 11.5 on my screen. Like, why don't you bid 10? He's like, great. We just bought 50. I'm like, we did what?
And how,
so you would sell the E-minis down to 10 and we would start selling Qs and everything else to kind of keep it all in line.
How old are you at this point?
Well, late 20s.
Late 20s. Okay.
No. Hold on. I'm probably, mid to late 20s.
Okay. That's what my guess was, but I just wanted to make sure I have this. Because did you have a weight of the responsibility of the job of what it was actually doing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you started realizing that you were trading with big money. The firm still exists to this day. It's called become jump trading. And so I learned a lot from two of the founders, Bill Dyson and Paul Gurnis, I did interact with them. because they had kind of their own group on one side. But it was one of those, I'm kind of odd for my size, being 6'3" and, and kind of stocky, but I like to sit back and just watch and kind of learn from people. And so I learned a lot from those two, and kind of how to handle composure and kind of what are different signals you're looking at. And kind of, I think back then what was a really cool thing on the floor is it was almost like playing a big game of poker, because it was really about reading people's tells, kind of looking at people, finding your own things that you could kind of, key in on, to make a trade. And so it ended up being I'm not a card player at all. But it's one of those things, it ended up being kind of teaching you a lot of the same lessons.
Did you know going in that you liked the founders or you liked the people there? Because I know you said before about you wanted to learn, you wanted to challenge yourself. Did you see that in them? Was that part of the decision, or something you realized in the mix?
No, I think it definitely was part of the decision. Once you kind of get there, and once you kind of started to assimilate into the team, it was really, you would go in every day and go, okay, how am I going to make this happen? How do I, what are we doing today? Well, I mean, you're kind of doing the same thing you did yesterday, but you have to do it again. And kind of, I love the idea of kind of constantly going in there every morning with a relatively clean sheet and going, okay, make it happen today. I don't know who said it, but there's a saying that always kind of sticks around the back of my head. Humans are the only organism on this earth that don't go 100% every day. If you're a plant, you got to try to grow 100% every day. You got to be the best you can be, or whatever. We have the flexibility of not having to do that. So at that point in time in my life, I loved kind of being challenged every day.
100% every day is a lot, right?
It is. It was tiring. Yeah. I'm only 22 now. This is what happened.
Yeah.
32. But it is. It's a young kind of man's game. I mean, I couldn't still do it. But I think it was a great way to really, it's fully immersing yourself in kind of an ecosystem and a lifestyle. And I think, that was a great way to learn it from inside out.
Yeah, I'll say that's immersion. And that's probably a big part of this too. Just the idea of you're immersed in something where the stakes are high enough to keep driving you forward, so long as you want to keep pressing against it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what happens? How's this job progress? What else is going on in life?
I ended up, oddly enough, my guy in the pit I was working with said, hey, I was at a Christmas party. He was like, hey, this company's looking to hire somebody to run an ARB desk in Minneapolis. Would you be interested? I'm like, sure. Yeah, I'll talk to him. And kind of, so I ended up talking to him. I ended up taking the job and moving to Minneapolis.
What'd you think of Minneapolis post Chicago?
Colder, I'll tell you that. But that was really nice. I mean, landing at 10,000 Lakes is no joke. Super nice people, friendly. I like the outdoors. The key thing with being up there is you can go out and play 9 holes of golf at 6 p.m. because it stays light until, 9:30 at night, 10. So if you like the outdoors, it's a great place to be.
How long do you stay in Minneapolis? How long is that? And how do you like working on an ARB desk? What was that like?
So that was actually probably the moment in time where I think if you can say, kind of look at your career and break it up in steps, this would be kind of steps 2 and 3 for me, I think, being up in Minneapolis. The company no longer exists. It was Knight Financial Products. It's now Citigroup Derivative Markets Incorporated, I think, if that still exists. So it was really sitting on an options desk. And they would end up with these huge role positions around expiry, and I would kind of help them work out of that. And then we also had a couple of people that I traded with. And so for me, it exposed me more to the derivative side of the world. They had Saturday morning options classes that I would attend. And so you really start looking and you kind of start going, okay, I've seen it from the poker players kind of world of trading pits on the floor. I've seen it kind of looking at the screens and things to follow from that angle. Now let's go over and learn about it from the derivative side. What are these guys looking at? And when you start kind of immersing yourself in that world, you really start kind of going, oh, there's a lot. I thought I kind of had a cursory knowledge of what's happening here. now I'm back to square one and I've got to learn all over again. And so that really kind of prepared me and taught me about options. I mean, they always say the equity markets move, but if the fixed income market can kind of, there's an old saying, you don't, when the bond market tells you something moves, that's the 800-pound gorilla. And so this was kind of moving my way into that. The options market really had a lot of impact at that point in time. And even now, it does, but a lot of people don't understand it. Kind of, they'll think, oh, the market's just rallying today. You don't really realize that maybe there's a huge expiring option position right there that's got so much gamma to it that you can't break through it until that expires. And so I think that for me was kind of another year and a half of just drinking from a fire hose.
In the immersion into that, because I feel like everybody I've talked to, especially for this show, who's been a market maker in options, it rewires your brain. I guess that's the best way to put it. That immersion rewires your brain, and you're not going to think about any other, once you understand it from the derivatives perspective too, you're not going to think the same way. What was that experience like for you?
It's funny you say that, because for the longest time, even after not being at that firm, you're always, what's the delta of that happen? Like the way it rewires your brain is you all of a sudden now look at the world in a list of mathematical probabilities, right? There's no right or wrong. It's okay. What's the assigned probability to that happening? And that's kind of how you start looking and going through life. And it took a while to kind of get out of that. It did, and so it's funny. It's very mathematical, and that was not me, which was interesting. So it took me a little bit longer to kind of get up and kind of get up to speed on that and kind of, watching the curves and everything else. But it was extremely, extremely enlightening.
How long does it last? What comes along next?
The same company moved me to Jersey City.
Oh, lovely area. Speaking of neighborhoods, does it get better than Jersey City?
I know. It was super nice. And they set me up in a place in Battery Park, which was really nice because on the outside of the door, I remember it was after 9/11, but it had like this, this area was had to be deep clean because of all the contamination or whatever. So that was a nice thing to come home to every night to look at on your door. But that for me that was kind of getting more back that was really focusing on the ETF side and kind of block trading, style of business. And so I kind of went from, just trading futures, doing arbitrage, big futures, E-minis versus ETFs, to then going ETFs versus baskets and futures. And now we're going to, overlay options on that. And now just going back to ETFs. And so that it was familiar. I think the difference in that kind of making that jump was just sizes. Instead of, being a market maker, now all of a sudden somebody's asking you for 1 million shares of something. You have to kind of give it to them at a way too tight of a price. So that was but the options did help with that because it would get back to risk management.
Right. And you had learned a new way to perspective that risk management as you're thinking through it.
Yeah.
Now we're into the early to mid 2000s here at this point, right?
Yep.
Kids coming along yet? Is that
nope? Not yet.
Still got a little bit of a gap. Okay. Are you settling down in life a little bit? Are you starting to enter into that mode?
So I met the woman of my dreams in Hoboken one day.
It's a great place to meet a woman of your dreams.
It is. I met her one day getting up. After I decided to move out of Battery Park, I moved over to Hoboken. And so one day, it was a Friday, stopped by a bar, walked in and saw this person, and that was it.
Good music in Hoboken too. Understated. Yeah.
Great music. Yes.
What's so just curious. So it's just a happenstance introduction. What's the woman of your dreams doing? Is she trading derivatives somewhere?
I was with a friend of mine, a guy that I worked with, and she was just at a bar, walked by, and we kind of saw each other. And she'll deny all of this, but that's when I was like, okay, that's it.
Okay. You get the tap, the lightning strike. What happens next career-wise? So you're in the city, you're doing this job. What happens next? Because you're not still doing that today. I know there's another jump here.
So we've got a couple more jumps.
Oh, good.
So after that, they moved me to Philadelphia to trade options again.
All right.
And so now I'm back on the floor trading index and sector options on the Philex, and being kind of a specialist, a fill-in specialist for the firm.
Was this your first? Were you were you technically on the floor before?
I was technically no, I was not technically on the floor with floor.
This is the first on the floor.
Yeah.
Your vest, looking all cute, the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I still got the whole thing.
All right.
Don't tell City, but I don't think they want it back at this point in time.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, right. I still have my buy tickets and sell tickets in the pockets.
Oh,
everything. It's great.
Fantastic. Did you like Philly? Was the city of brotherly love good to you? More neighborhoods in Jersey City there.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's still live outside of it. It's a blue collar city, and it takes some time to kind of get to where you appreciate it, because it's a city like none other. But yeah, I do. I like Philly. It grows on you.
That's a good way to put it. So you're in the pit, you're actually doing that job. Do you feel you're a little bit older than you were when you started off?
Yes.
Did going into the pit feel like a graduation, a weird lateral move? How excited were you to actually be doing the pit trading job?
Extremely excited.
Okay.
Extremely excited. Yeah, it was.
Why? Same word.
Well, I think it's kind of the culmination of seeing everything, right? It's kind of, okay, I kind of studied these two, great pit traders. I kind of watched the screens upstairs, learned it from that side of the business. And then I got to go trade block ETFs, learn a little bit more about options trading, and learn a little bit more about risk. And so it kind of became the kind of culmination of everything kind of weaving together, to do that. And so, there were times, if you were the specialist, you would, it was a weird environment in the sense that I was obviously eager. So, you want to get and trade everything, but the specialist, kind of shut you back and put you back in your place. And so you found out there was a hierarchy there, which was an interesting dynamic to be.
You're an ex-military guy. You must have seen some of this and go, oh, I know this.
Exactly. So I learned how to play it pretty well. I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is how this works. Got it.
Yeah. Managing up and down the chain. That's a life skill. Came right back.
Oh yeah. It just was, you're like, okay, I know how this game is played, and it felt very comfortable. The power of the Felix is you were literally in the basement of a building. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was just, it was a pretty dismal place to be. But what are you going to do? It still was fun for a while.
Underdogs working underground. That's what that city's all about.
Pretty much. It was, and there was a lot of great. It was great. The people that were down there were. I mean, it was fun. It was fun. There was always a funny story. There was always something crazy happening. So yeah.
How long are you in the trading pit before it's time to make a change, or what forces the next change?
So my wife and I were, at this point I'm married. My wife and I were awaiting the birth of our first, and my flip phone was on the counter. You're not supposed to have phones out, but since I was waiting, I had my flip phone out, the antenna pulled out, for you, and a water main burst overhead. And of course, just fried out my phone and fried out my tablet. And I was like, man, what am I doing? I got to get out of this place. This place is falling apart. And so a guy that I'd worked with, in Jersey City, he had since moved, switched firms, and he gave my name to the place he worked at. And I went up to New York and I interviewed, and I was talking to this one gentleman who was a managing director, and he asked me about the Philex, and I told him, I'm like, it's okay. Here's how everything works. Here's who's doing this. Here's who's doing that. And he looked at me and he goes, I like somebody who knows how everything works and can really integrate themselves into everything. So I ended up getting the job.
What company is this with?
So that's with Morgan Stanley.
Okay. What did they hire you to? What did they hire you for? What was that job?
I was like ETF block trader.
Why do you think he responded? I know it's impossible to transport yourself to these people's shoes. Why do you think he responded to, I like somebody who knows how everything works?
I think it's funny. I think that appeals to certain people. I would say I would go so far as to say it actually appeals to certain people, older individuals, because you before the age of computers and everything, options market makers, you had sheets you had to go through. they would have these big, massive printouts in their pocket. And so you kind of have to go through, okay, where's the price on it? What's the strike we're talking about? And so I think it was one of those, if you knew kind of how all the variables worked and kind of you had more than just, I do this and this is what I do, it really made you a better trader. And it made you kind of more useful to a firm. And I believe that's not necessarily the case today, because I think everything's now is just kind of sectorized and this is what I do. Back then, we were in that period where you were still shifting away from kind of having the more knowledge you had, the better you were, to everybody becoming specialists nowadays.
How aware were you in that specific period? Because, and to be at Morgan Stanley, to be doing ETF block trading, the industry is really growing at this point. Like, we're really starting to cook. So it makes sense why you'd want to be at a shop like Morgan Stanley through this proliferation. But how aware of that macro backdrop were you?
I'd say every day. Like it was something you like, okay, I've made it. This is the thing. And I would sit down sometimes at the desk and you would get calls from these hedge fund moguls who wanted to trade, IWM before the market opened, and I wanted to trade all this different stuff in block size. And you're like, I'm talking to these guys. Like, this is great.
They're calling me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't want to answer the call, but yeah, you still had to. But yeah, they were calling me. The coolest trade I ever did, the Vatican.
Wait, does the Vatican call you to put the trade on?
Vatican called the sales desk at Morgan Stanley and said we wanted to buy. I think it was like, I don't know, like 100,000 Qs. And I was like, it's the Vatican, man. They can buy it on the bid. I'm not going to shortchange the Vatican. So I lost money on that trade, God, in case you're wondering.
In case you're wondering, God. George Burns, you heard me?
Yep, exactly.
Got me over on those Qs.
Exactly.
How long are you at Morgan Stanley? How's that? Because are we pre-financial crisis still?
No, we're good. So we're starting to, like, this is when the GFC hits. Yeah. And so you're sitting there and you're starting to see, so we were kind of sitting next to the swaps desk. And you started to see things break, and it kind of, you're like, okay, volatility's ticking up. Swaps are starting to break. There's things happening here that, again, I don't understand kind of what's going on that side, but I know people typically don't break swaps. Yeah. So something's big is happening here. And it was kind of scary, right? I mean, just had a kid and I said, what's going on here? And so the gentleman I worked with at night went over to Mizuho Securities, big Japanese bank, not the softball shoemaker.
Commonly confused.
Yeah, they really honestly are. It's kind of fun.
I'm sure they are.
Mizuho, and they just got their trading license, and they were looking for somebody to kind of help set up equity trading operations. And so that's where I kind of really found my niche, I think, in that having knowledge of how everything works and set up and how everything clears and kind of how all this stuff, and then basically being able to trade, kind of became an asset. And it kind of gave, that interested me in kind of being able to set something up on my own. So went out, priced out the trading front end vendor, was helping the legal team negotiate contracts for the ETF providers, all these different things. And you're trading, running the North American ADR book, working with Stockholm, creating ETFs to lend. All these different things were really kind of interesting to me. It was like, okay, now the training wheels are off, and it's solely kind of, it's a combination of everything I've learned, but it's all kind of on me. And I loved my time there. I loved the people I worked with. Had a couple of management changes, and things started to change. So I eventually went to RBC, but it was a really great place to be. I loved my time at Mizuho.
What did you think about, and not, if you thought about it at the time, great. If you didn't think about it at the time, it's fine too. What I'm curious is to go from Morgan Stanley to Mizuho, like that size shift and what the responsibility was. Cause you learned a piece of the responsibility at Morgan, but then it was like, you probably got to own this entire thing there, which sounds.
I did. And you know what? It kind of, you're going to find this funny, but I'm actually a pretty risk averse individual. And so for me, we were on the backside of Lehman Brothers. And so I would get out for basically for lunch and walk around to some of the vendors or something like that, or some of the restaurants. And you would see people every day. And the cameras were there. I mean, it's kind of, I get you have to do a story, but it was really kind of heartbreaking because you'd see these people carrying out cardboard boxes and they'd been there their entire lives. And at Lehman was kind of notorious for people just constantly buying Lehman stock. And so a lot of these people had their whole entire life savings in Lehman Brothers, only basically to then become insolvent. And it was one of those, I was like, wow. And then Morgan Stanley's stock price went to, peanuts. And it was one of those, you kind of, I was like, okay, big Japanese bank, plenty of balance sheet. We didn't have to worry about that. I mean, if anything, we were getting calls from the US banks. Can you guys, basically give us some money? And so it really was kind of a nice segue into the international space. And so got to travel throughout Europe, visiting several of our offices over there, where they have offices in the UK and even in Geneva. I got to Zurich. I got to spend some time there. And so it was pretty interesting, covered clients in kind of Scandi. Loved my time up there. So it was kind of more the international. They allowed me to kind of go, okay, we've built it here. It's up and running in the US. Let's see how we can actually liaise with and kind of work with, our other offices and kind of build that. And so, I'd like to think that showed them you could make money. And so since then they've kind of built out a much more, integrated offering with kind of research and everything else in the US.
Secretly, I think it would have been fantastic if you designed the softball shoe, but I'm going to accept this as a.
Well, it wouldn't have been that colorful though, Matt. No.
So from
It would have
there,
been plain white, but I don't know if you're going to get much more color out of me than maybe blue thrown in there.
it goes back to the colorblind problem.
Yeah.
Not good for graphic design. Go figure.
No, I would not be your best graphic design student. I think it's probably why I stayed with databases.
Stick with the data. A lot of black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
Red and black can get their own time. What's the shift to RBC? So you survived the financial crisis, partly because where you are and you're definitely aware of it. What comes next?
Yeah. So, guy that I worked with at Mizuho went to RBC and he said, "Oh, we're building a ETFs and swaps book." Okay. And this is kind of where I guess I became the Jose Aquindo, just kind of like the utility guy, can do a little bit of everything. So I followed him to RBC, was there for 6-7 years. Built the ETF desk twice, once onshore within the equities division, once offshore. Management changes. I mean, this was a period of time on the street where somebody would come in, like a competing bank would come in and hire the managing director or head of the desk. And then within like a year, everybody on that desk would leave and they would fall into the new firm. And this cycle just kind of, moved around. And Deutsche Bank was making a big push at one time. So they would hire a bunch of people. So now then, Morgan now has to go rehire a bunch of people. And so, went to RBC, built it out. People started leaving, still stayed there, liked it, great people there. Loved kind of working back and forth across the border with our friends in Toronto. And at that point in time, we just kind of, we built it offshore, management changes, everything else. And so we kind of split ways. And that's where I finally moved over to the asset management side of the business at Wisdom Trade.
All right. So two questions about that run, because we have, was 2000 Flash Crash? Did Flash Crash do anything crazy? Was that a crazy
Flash
run
Crash?
in
Yes.
2010?
So one of the things that had happened, when we were at RBC, kind of where I started to see the writing on the wall, we were building the swaps book, had it up, had our first swap on the book. And then UBS had a swaps trader in London that blew up. And so all of a sudden the risk averse Canadians were like, whoa, we don't know if we want to do this now. We don't know what's happened. Like this, wait a minute, we didn't see this. And then you had the flash crash. And so it were kind of two things. So they started to kind of rein back in risk. And then you had Dodd-Frank. And so that's what they wanted to they were very conservative in the fact of where you're taking on risk. And so they wanted to move the desk move it away from the equity division, which was basically our salespeople. Move it up into like offshore entity. And so it was a lot of different things that I kind of was like, they just kind of, then there was some just different managerial issues. And so it was kind of one of those, I'm like, I think it's probably, I'm going to start looking again. Some more person I worked with at Morgan, was at Wisdom Tree, and so I went there, and that was a big change for me because that was the first time I was not on a trading desk anymore. Now you're on a capital markets desk at a firm who's trying to sell people, an ETF, or, at that point in time it was an ETF. And so that marked another kind of big step for me. But what I liked about it is as trading was becoming more and more consolidated and managed by computers, this was a chance to actually get out and talk to people. And so this was a chance for me to, I'm still in the office, but I don't necessarily have to stare at this computer all day long. I can actually have conversations with real life folks. And so that's kind of what I realized I wanted to start doing more of, instead of just staring at 6 screens. I mean, by the time I left RBC, I had 6 massive screens. It was kind of just like this whole, concave thing. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, you're not even interacting with things. You're like clicking mouse buttons up and down, wrist tolerance. So God bless the people that still do that today. But it was a divine intervention from whatever deity you choose. But it was kind of a good time to just kind of, let's go this way.
But the guy who doesn't want one screen ends up looking at 6 all day.
Life needs to course correct. I mean, talk about headaches every day. You just grind your teeth. You're like, what am I doing here? So it was nice for me, and it became kind of a natural shift to be able to take all that knowledge that I've had, whether it be options trading, portfolio trading, equity trading. Even my time at RBC, I ended up kind of working on the equity desk for a period of time. I traded REITs and utilities. It was, which was like the perfect sector. The guy who taught me to trade, he was out for a period of time. He had to have surgery. So I ran the desk for a while, and it was one of those things. You'd be coming back from the bathroom. Hurry up. I need a quote on this. You're like, I don't need to hurry. That market doesn't move.
You can stroll.
He kicks out
for your utes.
I can walk to my desk. I don't need to run.
Wait, what year is the Wisdom Tree jump?
So I want to say that was probably 2016.
All right.
Yeah.
And I say that just because it's an innovative product lineup. They're pushing the envelope with some of the hedged vehicles. That's before the big DXJ run up and all that stuff. But we're still in the Brexit stuff. So there's.
Yeah, they had DXJ was their big thing. They had hedged, which was hedged European equity. And I think the funny thing about this was a period of time people talk to clients. They'll be like, you're just known for DXJ and hedge. You're like, yeah, but this is where we're starting we have these great other products too, right? We've got all this other kind of smart beta stuff. And this is the time that smart beta really started kind of picking up, and this was probably the first dent in kind of passive indexing's armor, to where you started to see, okay, there's something else to do here. What you've seen, what's worked for you is this low interest rate environment. And it's just a kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so that doesn't necessarily work in a higher interest rate environment, at least to the tune that you expect it to. And so why don't you actually start to, kind of look at other things? And my pitch line, if I could give you one, was we design indexes or ETFs how you would if you had the time and research.
All right. That's a good.
Not bad, right?
That's not bad. A lot of wisdom in that tree up there.
Yes, exactly. There was a lot of wisdom in that.
How long's that, or how long is the run at Wisdom Tree? What comes next?
So, that was, talk about, again, feeding back to the Jose Aquindo. So 2 years, director of capital markets. The next 2.5 years were spent managing Canada. So I was a de facto head of Canada, head of national accounts, head of capital markets. It was, head of just basically there was about 6 of us up there. And it was great. I mean, I loved being across Canada from one province to the other side of the country to the other. Loved my time up there. Loved the people. Loved the country. But it really kind of got me to talking people at a higher level. I think you started talking to some C-suite individuals, which, to me, when I thought I was at Morgan Stanley, you're like, wow, this is and you realize when you start having these conversations with, presidents of companies and CEOs, they're just average folk. they're just normal people. Like I belong here too. I can have the same conversation. But what really stuck out to me most was coming from that trading background. I could bring something else to the table when I was speaking to them that they'd never come in contact with before. A lot of these people spend so much time on the asset management side that they had a cursory knowledge of how risk was actually happening and would play out, or how trading actually worked. And so you really kind of, when you kind of can pull back the veil on that and kind of go a little bit deeper, I'll joke and say, take it from ETF 101 to ETF 404. And that became kind of an aha moment for a lot of these individuals. And it really kind of, for me, ended up contributing to me wanting to talk about ETFs and kind of trading in markets more.
What do you think that is, where your knowledge base is a breath of fresh air? Because there's something about that. You've had enough reps in all these other areas, and now all of a sudden the CEO is across the table and it's like, wait, tell me more.
Yeah, they would say, you can't trade that size. Actually, I can. And they're like, what do you mean? We're like, well, okay, if I go ask an ETF trader, right? If I go ask, pick a firm, if I guess, how liquid is this product? They're not going to look at the on-screen volume. They're going to look at what's in the basket. And then that's going to tell you how liquid the product is. And when you tell that to people, even today, they kind of look back and you can go, what are you talking about? And I like to say, okay, if I had an ETF, we're going to call it, MATT, but it's with Amazon. It's the best ticker ever. We should check and see if we can use that. So Amazon, Apple, we're going to throw an SPY just to kind of balance it out. And maybe we'll throw in Tesla or NVIDIA. But it doesn't really trade that many shares. All of a sudden, those four names, you look at it and you go, well, okay, yeah. And I'm like, that's it. Like, an ETF is a wrapper, that just basically reflects the liquidity of something else. And so, in continuing to even do this now with clients, it's kind of interesting when you look at and you graph out the ETF universe. I think the last time I ran the numbers, 92% of the ETF universe trades under 100,000 shares a day. And guess what's in that 92%? Typically the best performers. It's typically some of the ones that you're like, wow, okay. But you kind of have to educate people and work with them to get them over that hurdle of, just because something's liquid, take a little bit more time to look into it. That's something that really kind of fits your overall investment philosophy.
So these newfound conversations with CEOs, you coming into your own confidence, where's this land you next?
So lands me back covering, so Wisdom Tree sold the Canadian business, brought me back to be the firm's, at that point in time, only multi-channel coverage person. So I was talking to advisors, I was talking to RIAs, pensions, whatever. And I realized I wasn't the advisor guy. I kind of more wanted to talk to people and work with people on kind of more of a, not a higher level, but kind of more of, I know what value I can add to you. And if you're just going through, say, a big wirehouse trading desk, then my value is not of use to you. So then I'm kind of, selling you product. So I kind of knew my spot. And so looking around at that point in time, active ETFs were just starting to kind of become more and more popular. And I was like, okay, that to me is the natural extension from smart beta. And I'm not just talking our book here, but I really do believe that we've gone over so many years of the stock pickers being just beaten, bludgeoned to death, not outperforming the S&P, to now all of a sudden smart beta is the way to go. And now what's the next extension of that? I think it's active ETFs. And so, that's what really, I think, one of the things that attracted me to Harbor, and kind of, keeps me going every day, because I still think we're seeing that play out in different, the one thing I always used to say is international. Like, you don't want to own a broad-based international ETF. You're just owning European banks, oddly not great performing this year, but in the past they've been a dumpster fire, and you're like, why? That's just going to drag you down. Go concentrate. And so that, that was kind of, that fits in, with a lot of the different things. Kind of pick your spots. You can still go broad-based for your core if you want, but there's also these satellites. Now you don't have to kind of, I think one of the nice things is there's a lot of diversity out there. There's a lot of different kind of, things where you can kind of fine tune it a little bit more.
Is there anything chomping at the bit yet, just like active ETFs chomped at the bit of smart beta. Is there anything, or are we still too in the early innings on what can be done within the active ETFs?
I think we're still in the, it's funny. This is a question. I think probably like the third inning still. I think it's still kind of early, right? You're still seeing that active is only, say, maybe 25% of the ETF universe. And, don't hold me on that, but it's a small part, but they are getting an outsized portion of the inflows, right? And so I think it's one of those where, until you start to see that pendulum swift, where it's like, changed, where you start to see just as many active as there are passive, then I think you're going to that'll be times right for the next, invention. But I also think, mutual funds, there's still certain wrappers, and this is the trader in me, that I would say you're better off having something in a mutual fund than you are in an ETF, because you don't necessarily want to have the transparency that an ETF, requires.
Which brings all of it back to trading, right? Because there's the trading and the execution at each of the layers.
Yeah, it really does. It's kind of one of those, I'm not going to pick on a specific spot, but like, if you're looking at kind of obscure parts of the bond market, might as well have it in the mutual fund, because the pricing you would get every day on an ETF can be kind of a little wonky and may not be as accurate.
It's so interesting how liquidity is just the driver of all these things at the end of the day, and understanding where the bottlenecks are.
Yeah.
That catches up more or less up to present, right? I got us all the way up to today. Fantastic. I have some notes. I have to ask you some follow-up questions here.
Okay.
Part of this is, I wonder how you talk. It might be too soon to talk about this to your kids, because it might not make sense for 10 more years still, because that's how life works. This idea from the beginning of driving in silence, and I think about this as cultivating quiet in our lives, and just people have lost the ability to be bored. What do you think about that? I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming this is home office. You're not driving to work today.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it's good to be bored. I think in this day and age, kids need to be bored. They'll kick, complain that they don't have their phones, and they don't they're bored of that stimuli for a couple of minutes, and after about an hour, they go find something to do. And I think that encourages the imagination part of it, this side of us. I think it's everything that's been created up until now has been kind of somebody saw a need and kind of stepped back and thought of it in their head before they started to kind of build something. And so I think the little devices that we stare at so often kind of keep us away from doing that as much as we used to.
Couldn't agree with that one more. You talked about knowing what you wanted in the city and picking where you're going to live. And there's this Rory Sutherland idea that I'm probably going to get wrong, but I think he was talking about it in getting an apartment or picking a house. He basically said everybody lists what they want. They list the thing, I want to live here, and I want, a dishwasher with this feature and blah, 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 blah. It's like the actual thing you should do is list all the things that you don't want, and then just assume the things that you will want. You're going to get there's upside skew to a bunch of these categories of what it is. But number one, remove all the things you don't want from the equation.
That's how I start almost anything. Yes. And that's what I tell my daughter when we're looking at schools. I'm like, you don't necessarily have to want to go here. I want you to be able to walk away from this visit going, I don't want that. And what is that? Okay. Now we know. Now you can check something off, and that's meaningful, right? I don't want to go to school in the city. Why? Okay. Well, then there you go. Now you've answered. Now you've gone a step deeper and you said, okay, so now we won't have to go to any of the schools and cities.
Right. Exclude all of them. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Like we can now basically start drilling in, because, using your house analogy, that's how I approach it. I mean, I'm handy. My dad was a contractor. And so I grew up, I can change and do a lot of different things, but I'll look at what is it I don't want. And then then you start filtering that down and go, okay, does this have the structure that I do want? And we can kind of work with that.
What about, and I think there's a variation on this too, there's a markets application to that exact same methodology or way of thinking, right? Like the exclusionary factors of here's the things I don't want, which might even be future scenarios or outcomes. not just your house. You apply this at work too, I think.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, I think if you're looking at, I think you looked at, if we look at the one thing that fascinates me, if I could go back in time, I think I would probably take more psych classes, because I really think the key to understanding the markets is about psychology, not necessarily. I think the finance can come after. Investors and humans are prone to not want losses. We're prone to not want pain. And I think the people who started creating these buffer ETFs understood that better than most. And so if you look at it and you tell people, I can give you something, may limit your upside, but I'll cap your downside. The max you'll lose is this. All of a sudden now, oh, that's great, until you have the massive up year. But it's still nice to, you'll still have a segment of the population that says, that's fine. I just don't want the downside. And so I think really that's the part that kind of interests me. And you factor that in, or you add that into kind of what don't you want? And then I think you can kind of start creating a whole new different array of products. Like, right? So international, it's funny, when I was trying to sell international in Texas, it was, trying to give water away in the middle of the ocean. Great thing of salt water. Do you want some? No. I got okay. But I kind of came up with this idea, like, okay, why don't you want something? Well, I don't want it for this. I don't want it for this. I don't want it for this. Okay. And that's what I think, a lot of firms are starting to do. I don't think many are, but when you start kind of solving for that problem, that's when I think you're really hitting home.
You made a comment, and we'll have to source the original quote, because I've heard this before too, and I don't know where it comes from originally, but it's definitely something in nature or science, that humans can't go 100% every day. Do you have kind of like a meter in your mind? Are you aiming for your 6% time, your 97% time? How do you actually think about that as a metaphor?
Well, I think it kind of comes back to that quiet. I think you don't necessarily have to go 100% all day, but I think if you kind of pull yourself back or give yourself kind of, a couple minutes downtime in between, I think you can find out that you can give a pretty good high percentage for meaningful parts of a day. And that's kind of how I try to fashion my day. So in the morning, I'm up at typically before 6, start reading all the news sources and everything else. And I'm pretty much engrossed in it, that and coffee till, I get it out, hopefully by around 9ish. Then I kind of go get my cereal, my breakfast. And then after the open 9:30, I kind of sit back and go, okay, now it's time to just, let's decompress for a little bit and let's think about everything that, that you've said and what's happening in the marketplace and everything else. And then I'll kind of do that and just not veg, but just kind of bring everything back down, give myself a mental break for a little bit, and monitor everything, make sure nothing blows up before ramping back up again a little bit later.
It's interesting to think about that and dialing it up and down. And I'm glossing over this part of those. I love the Vatican trade story. I'm definitely going back to that one, but I'm glossing over it because I'm jumping to this with that meter of turning it up and down, is that desire to go back and talk to people, and that desire to then talk to the CEOs and talk to the people where you discover that niche, and you discover the niche back. It's just back to psychology again.
Yeah.
Like that, that's the part you figured yourself out. So you could start to figure yourself, wait, I'm by these high powered people. And now I kind of see how I fit in and what I can add.
Yep. Exactly. It's funny. I talked to a former boss of mine, and I said, I never wanted to be the guy in the limelight. I always wanted to be the guy behind that person. Because I like being able to kind of get my hands in a lot of different things and being able to help people out in that sense. I don't mind the pressure of a job responsibility or something like that, but it's really, I find when you start to kind of get to a certain point, you trust other people less and kind of maybe yourself more, or your circle of trust shrinks, right? Whereas I kind of like to be able to talk to everybody. At the end of the day, if somebody has an interesting angle, I truly can say I'm one of the few people who are like, convince me that you're right. I will objectively sit here and listen to you. I can tell you right now, no preconceived notion. You believe the earth's flat. Why is it flat? Let's talk about it. Much to the consternation of my wife and kids, because I'll end up in a lot of interesting conversations. But needless to say, that's literally how I love I love just learning and kind of talking to people. And I think when you do that, that doesn't lend well for that head roll. Hey, you have to be decisive, kind of, this is what we're doing. This is why. Whereas I kind of like to go in a lot of different directions and see which one kind of fancies me or I fancy.
There you go. You like excitable people, you like excitable things. And that probably that's kind of full circle back to all the music interests and stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll go from Spice Girls to, the Temptations to, you name it. I mean, I've done it all. The one I try to use this start of every summer is Baz Ullman's Always Wear Sunscreen.
Oh, great. Yeah.
There's a lot of key life learning lessons in there. And I used that one morning and all the younger people were like, I sent the link and I'm like, I know you have no idea what I just told you. Just go click the link.
Press this button.
Yeah.
Get this stuck in your head.
Exactly. I'm like, it is, it's not all about dancing the funky chicken, but it has one of those things where I think these days, if you don't believe or stand for something, then you'll fall for anything. And kind of, let's get everybody back on kind of having a core set of principles. I think that's kind of one thing I learned from, my upbringing in the military and kind of then what's your sound on who you are? And you figured yourself out. I mean, everything else can kind of become fun.
So tell me what I want, what I really, really want. Where can I find you on the internet? If I want to send people to bug you these days, where should they look you up?
LinkedIn for the most part. Yeah. Bryan Moore on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. I don't post everything, but I know you've liked a lot of the stuff, some of the stuff I post. What I try to do is just kind of look at the world through an object lens, right? I mean, I don't have to be a politician and say I only served 4 years, but I find a lot of interest in what China did looking back and kind of why we're where we are now. They took a 10-year approach. We're trying to do something, in less than 4 that took decades. And so, that's the historian in me kind of going, whoa, wait a minute, time out. I don't think this works the way you think it works. If we're looking back at that kind of history, pretty doesn't.
If you needed a better plug on why to connect with Bryan on LinkedIn, there you have it. I want to thank you so much for coming out today. I'm going to encourage people to go follow along. Bryan Moore, you are truly an intentional investor. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Matt. Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you're watching The Intentional Investor so more people can find our show. You can follow Matt directly at cultishcreative.com or at cultishcreative on Twitter. For more great content at the intersection of investing and life, check out epsilontheory.com or at epsilontheory on Twitter.